We are here discussing about blockchain and sustainability, an interesting topic, as I just outlined to our audience. Let's start with Emmanuelle. Let's start, as usual, we do in these debates, with our institutional speaker. We get a bit of an institutional perspective directly from the European Commission on how the European Commission has been looking at the green and digital transition. And so can you give us a bit of an outlook of the work done by the Commission in this area? And what is the focus of the 2020 Circular Economy Action Plan? How do you think can blockchain technology be leveraged to achieve those objectives and actions?
Thank you, Tommaso, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm really glad that I'm meeting the blockchain community with my green hat. And so to answer your first question on the digital and green transition, you know that this has been really a critical priority for the van der Leyen Commission. So there has been a lot of strategies, legislation, regulatory actions which have been promoted. In the context of the Green Deal, obviously, all the proposals on climate neutrality by 2050, the Fit for 55 package, but also zero pollution objective, biodiversity protection have been extremely high on the agenda. It has also been about digital policy, and this you know very much. And today, the Commission also released an assessment report on the digital decade, where we stand in Europe, and calling also for more actions from the European institutions, the member states, and the stakeholders community. This being said, it was not only about legislation or strategies, it has been very much also about funding. We have allocated massive resources to the digital and the green transition, be it in terms of innovation, digital Europe, but also regional policy. And after the COVID crisis and the economic crisis, also to recover from that crisis through EU Next Gen. And we set targets as to the amount that should be dedicated to the transition, both green and digital. So there are many things that could be said, but on this twin transition, I would really like to draw your attention on a big study we did, which is a strategic foresight by 2050, how the green and the digital transition can go hand in hand, how can they support each other, and what are the synergies. And there, it's very clear in this report that digital technologies can play a key role in achieving climate neutrality, reducing pollution, and restoring biodiversity. And also the green transition can help the digital sector, because by making sure that we are decarbonizing our industry and our systems, it will support the greening of technologies such as big data analytics, blockchains, or the Internet of Things. You said it. There are also points where we need to be very vigilant, where the two transitions do not go hand in hand. And it's related, obviously, to the energy consumption, because ICT are responsible for 5 to 9% of the global electricity use. It's also related to the generation of electronic waste, 75 million tons by 2030. So there, you know, if we are more forceful on electronic waste also to reduce it, it could also help the digital transition. And for example, water usage as well for cooling data centers or for chip manufacturing. So those are attention points which are extremely important. I mean, we all went through a summer which is full of signals of the deterioration of our environment. In this report, you can also find a number of key factors of success. And among them, I will not tell you everything about this report. It's short and it's really strategic, and it's also the future. So it's a good read. But a key success factor is clearly a fair and inclusive transformation. We need to make sure that the transition, be it green or digital, works for everyone. I'm switching to circular economy because it's my area of work. much more than the green agenda or the digital agenda at large. So there, the purpose of the circular economy and its action plan is to make sure that we keep the resources and the materials for as long as possible in the economy. We minimize the waste, and we reduce the need for resource extraction, because we have also huge figures on how much resource extraction and processing generates in terms of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, 50%, 90% of the biodiversity loss, and 90% of the water stress. So if we are able to keep the products for longer, the materials for longer in the economy and minimize waste, we have a massive opportunity. Today, only 12% of the products placed on the market comes with recycled material. We are relying 88% of the time on virgin resources. So there has been a bigger focus on sustainable products throughout the Green Deal policies, supporting business models on circular economy and consumer empowerment, with key value chains, batteries and vehicles, packaging, textiles, plastics, building, food, water, and nutrients. And there, technologies for a circular economy can help us, because it means that we can track, trace, and map the resources that can be reused in secondary markets, and thereby, again, lowering the pressure on natural resources. So we also see that this can really bring an advantage to many companies across Europe, because we can deliver substantial reduction or material savings throughout value chains and production processes, and generate extra value. So for us, this is really important. We have many examples where we've been trying to push for the use of digital technologies, notably with the digital product passports, to tag the batteries, to tag future products, textiles, but also to tag vehicles with circularity passports, to make sure that the data comes associated with the product, and that we have systems for digital product passports that work and very concretely give us this twin transition, which we all need to make sure that Europe remains very competitive and keep an economic advantage also in the global competition. I'll stop there, but obviously we can also develop further.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. I think that was a very interesting initial remarks, and I think indeed the digital product passport is one of these concrete examples of how is the European Commission itself thinking about using blockchain technology to change the way we think, produce, consume, and dispose of products. So let's move on then a moment, maybe to Patrick first, and then I'm sure there will be a bit of interesting common points that we can elaborate a bit more. But Patrick, let's hear from you. First of all, how did you become interested in this intersection between blockchain and sustainability? And I think when we were talking, you mentioned, of course, a few points that resonated really a lot with the work that we are doing as well. What are these main misconceptions that exist when it comes to the environmental impact of blockchain technology and different consensus mechanisms? Can you give us a bit of an outlook for our audience?
Yeah, happy to. Not sure, am I connected?
Yeah.
So look, I'm an analyst by training, and everything I do, I typically invest a lot of time to take a very close look and try to understand. And part of this process is to use technology rather than just read up on it. And very quickly you have a learning curve. And so early on in 16, 17, I started playing around with various blockchains, built a small team of friends that had technological capabilities, and we built products. And we realized that there is severe differences between the various blockchains that exist in terms of functionalities, but also scalability and privacy and so on. So it's not all apples and apples. There's indeed apples and oranges until today. And scalability has been something that appealed to me always because technology for me is about efficiency. And I come from the investment background, and I want to invest in something that makes things faster, more secure, more robust, better overall. And typically it has to do with efficiency. And so scalability made a lot of sense. And I followed through on this. The reason I'm here in Brussels representing the BSV Association as a public affairs representative is because there's a significant misunderstanding around sustainability and proof of work. The proof of work versus proof of stake kind of consensus mechanism debate has been around for a while. And again, I don't think it's apples and apples. And the fact that proof of stake might be more sustainable on the surface, but in my opinion is not an argument because it heavily discounts other factors such as the integrity of data that is actually guaranteed through proof of work. In proof of work, a miner can join in every new race that is launched for the next block, right? Solving an algorithmic puzzle, and you find a block, you can write the data on chain, and you propagate to the network, and the next race starts. But you can always join again. And proof of stake is effectively an oligarchy. And already today, if I look at the distribution of validators in proof of stake, it's very concerning for me. So the integrity of data has to be, that's the core function for me of a blockchain. And data today has value, and data comes in many forms. And so as an investor, we have fairly quickly then started looking at what innovation is enabled by this new emerging technology. And we think there's two superpowers. One is it's an immutable data ledger, right? It gives structure to data and it makes it trustable. And it allows you to easily kind of price and monetize data now and share it with others. And the second one is micropayments. So being able to send a fraction of a cent in real time. And that for me is the missing puzzle piece for many use cases such as autonomous driving or being able to price an API request, login information. It is something that I think will bring a lot of innovation. It's simply not possible today to share value at a fraction of a cent in real time. That's new. I mean, we pursue and support a lot of use cases out there. We're interested in anyone that builds. And utility for me is the second factor, so next to scalability. The society hasn't really seen utility in blockchain so far. They perceive it from media outlets as the token speculation that we hear about, the price of Bitcoin and so on. That's the debate. So I'm very happy about a much more profound discussion here in this forum. And without utility, there will be no broader adoption. And without broad adoption, there will be no economic incentives for miners to maintain the network, which eventually leads to a chain death. So that is one factor. But the utility itself is also the reason why people are accepting a certain ecological cost. Nobody complains about building and running a hospital because there's value to society, right? Nobody complains about maintaining a highway. There's utility. So far, we haven't seen that much utility. One last point before I hand over is just more data, more trustable data, I think allows us to hold especially institutions responsible. And it is institutions that have to come up with innovation in order to solve problems like the plastic problem. I think sometimes they try to push this to the consumer by trying to market a different product or so at a premium typically. But the reality is, especially for plastic bottles, a fully recycled bottle is still more expensive than a newly kind of created one. And that is the fundamental problem. The incentive is not yet there. So there needs to be technological innovation that allows for cheaper production actually of fully recycled plastic. But anyway, I'm personally involved in a few projects and I can share more on this. It's around kind of collection of plastic, incentivizing people to contribute in this value chain. But I think there's many use cases that would benefit from both these aspects, micropayments, and also the immutable data ledger, allowing for trust in data.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I think Patrick really touched upon a couple of very important points already, especially when we're talking about utility, right? You mentioned it really well, I think. what is the utility of something, how do we assess the utility of something, and then what are the climate considerations in this case that should take a role in that assessment, right? So as you said, we don't really do the same kind of assessment or analysis of the energy consumption of everything that we develop, but there is of course a lot of scrutiny about the energy consumption of blockchain. So I think we touched upon a few interesting topics there, but now I would like to turn to Ed. And Edward, first of all, I think you have also an interesting story to tell on how you got to this area, to this space. What was your interest? How did you get interested in the circular economy and then the blockchain space? And then I think you also can share with our audience a bit of a few more insights on what is really out there, what are concrete real-world use cases that are being developed in this area, what can be done to support them, and I think you can also give us a bit of a highlights on what is really being what can be achieved with that, right? How is the use of this solution changing the way we approach, for example, conservation, consumption, and so on?
Sure, thanks. So I run Calligraphy Digital, which is an investment fund. We invest in blockchain-based businesses on behalf of a large family office, global family office. I came to circular economy because I was a bit despondent with the whole sort of activism approach to dealing with climate change. And I think in most other areas of business, we've shown that kind of telling people what not to do is not a good way to get people to do something. And I came across the circular economy through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is really supporting this move away from take, make, use and waste, which is the linear economy, around to the kind of reuse, recycle, reduce consumption, reuse and recycle when we're kind of going about our business. The blockchain part of it was really a realization that this whole problem, I think, is about data. It's about data integrity. It's about data management, data transfer. And when you think about sustainability, I think there's really three kind of areas to it. One is economic, one's environmental, and one's social. From an economic perspective, there's more gold in a ton of electric waste than there is in a ton of iron ore at the moment, and yet we're only recycling, as Emmanuelle said, about 12 to 17% of that. So we've got a massive problem when it comes to how we're getting kind of valuable products back into our ecosystem and into our businesses. The digital product passport is a massive piece of legislation which should hopefully help with that. They closed their kind of request for information yesterday, and the use of blockchain is not a foregone conclusion. They are looking at cloud-based technologies as well, and they're going to have to make a decision as to whether a cloud-based technology or blockchain is going to be better for trying to get value back into business systems. I think from my perspective, having read all the documentation, the sort of counterintuitive or unexpected point about cloud versus blockchain is that the blockchain actually offers it offers security for people that are putting information into the system. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. IBM and Maersk tried to join up to optimize processes for shipping, and they built a blockchain. They made it permissioned, right? So it was closed, and the whole project fell flat on its face. And the reason was that no one else in the shipping industry wanted to give IBM and Maersk all of their shipping data. So, if you think about that from a DPP perspective, we need to have security around the data that's being put into the system, but we also need it to be global. And there's an interesting panel earlier on zero-knowledge proofs, and using blockchain, we're able to put zero-knowledge proofs on top of that data, which means that we know that it exists, but we don't necessarily know what it is. And I think we'll see where that goes, but certainly blockchain should be the technology of choice. From an environmental perspective, I think the problem with conservation in particular is how you value something that something negative hasn't happened to yet, if that makes sense. So in England, we have a whole bunch of charities, as I'm sure you know, We don't have a single environmental charity in the top 10 of all charities that's donated to in the country. We'd prefer to give to donkeys than we would give to the environment. And the reason is that it's quite difficult to attribute value to something before it's happened. So if a donkey's died, you kind of know and you feel sorry for it, you give it some money. But if you don't know that the world's going to burn, or it hasn't happened yet, it hasn't affected you yet, then you're less likely to give money to it. So what we're looking at is how blockchain can revolutionize the carbon credit market. And that really is about how you attribute value to, in particular, forests, mangroves, farms, and farming practices. And there you're really, there's three components to that. It's the ecological state protocol, so building protocols with data where everyone agrees of what the data collection is going to look like and how that data is going to be managed. You then have the ecological contracts, which is like, okay, well, if I do this, then what do I get paid? And then you have the supply protocols at the end, which is like, how's the value delivered to the people that own the forest? And blockchain is the only technology that can do that because it's global, it's trustless, so all that data can go into a global distributed ledger, and it has provenance. So the key thing about conservation is that you're able to track the data through time, and that you can trust it. And blockchain really enables that from a sustainability perspective. Final thing, from a social perspective, there's two excellent books which I'd recommend everyone to read. One is Prosperity Without Growth by Tim Jackson, and the other one is Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. And both of them have in there elements of sustainability which can be achieved through what universal basic income, which is in effect governments providing money for free to people. And the idea there is that if you have more money, you're able to make better spending choices, more sustainable spending choices, and the bad practices of cheap product that are misvalued against the world's assets, if you like, you do away with that. And blockchain is an enabler of the distribution of wealth, both from a kind of access to the dollar through stablecoin type perspective, but also through realizing the value that everyone has just as existing as human beings. So Coca-Cola spend $4 billion a year on marketing and advertising. And that's like a kind of huge like splat against the wall in terms of them trying to grab your attention, trying to use Facebook algorithms to target people with specific preferences. There's no reason why, in theory, that money shouldn't be distributed to people, so long as you have a data, your data that you're able to control, and that you are willing to give access to companies, and then you can get value from those companies for providing your attention, for providing them with information on your spending patterns. Perhaps you want to offer up your healthcare data. All of these things have value. At the moment, they're distributed in centralized companies, but offering people the opportunity to generate value, real value, monetary value from these things is very important for consumers to be able to make more sustainable spending choices.
Thank you, Ed. And first of all, I wanted to ask whether, as we discussed earlier, let's have a nice conversation. So if anybody wants to react to anything that has been said, feel free to do so. So we keep it a bit more conversation, let's say. But maybe then we can kickstart that by asking Emmanuelle if you have any reaction to all of this, because Patrick and Ed have mentioned a few interesting areas that maybe have not yet been explored so much by the European Commission. Do you think there is are you getting inspired by what you're hearing today? Are there other areas of the European Green Deal, or generally speaking of the green ambitions of the European Commission, that could probably, leverage blockchain technology one way or another?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm really, again, very happy to be here because I don't know so much the blockchain communities, and it goes, with different profiles, including on investing in the right projects. So I hope that throughout your holy grail search for the right projects, you will find, the right people who can really contribute to this transformation. So I don't know if you could tell us a bit more about plastic, because I got very interested on plastics. We give an incentive in EU law by prescribing that all these bottles of plastics, by 2025, they will have 25% of recycled plastics in there. So there is clearly a legal incentive for everyone to do this. And we have a lot of work ongoing on how, we can calculate the recycled plastics that comes from whom, how, what type of information is being circulated from between the mechanical recycler or chemical recycler to the brand owner to the legislator. So I'm sure that there are probably, plenty of opportunities. But if you can tell us a bit more
I'll
about,
tell you an example.
good examples.
Maybe I'll just jump in because is there an incentive for me to recycle the bottle?
That could also be really a great opportunity.
How do we close that loop, right?
In deposit and return schemes, what do I get? Do I get my money, and how do I get it back? Do I get it back from the big machine at the supermarket, or in a different manner?
So in Germany, you have the deposit, right, on cans and also plastic bottles.
Okay.
And I think money helps, right? People like money, and it incentivizes them to not throw, but rather bring them back to the recycling station. I have personal business interest in East Africa, and as a matter of fact, in 2 weeks I'm traveling to Uganda, and locally we're hosting an event with a local authority around collecting plastic at Lake Victoria shore. It's a beautiful landscape, but obviously, plastic is a big topic, and the reason is also there's no recycling in the country. So sometimes when we look at our habits of recycling, this is not the standard in the world, by far not, right? There is no such policies in probably the super majority of the world, and this causes another problem because there's companies such as Coca-Cola that are very present in this market that have set themselves recycling or kind of targets for recyclable material, but they're not finding enough. And as soon as this bottle lands in the mixed waste, typically it lands just, in the ocean or somewhere, or it's burned. But if it lands in a mixed waste, they can't use it anymore. They need the clean kind of a box with a recyclable. And so they're actually not finding enough right now. Exactly. So how can you incentivize along the value chain people to start recycling, even if there's no policy? And what is the thing in Uganda is that there's a lot of bottle pickers. This is often, all kinds of people, and they are all day at the wasteland, and they are looking for the bottles, and they're collecting them, and they're dropping them at the local recycling station, the factory that is provided by Coca-Cola. They earn about $1 or $2 a day, so that makes a difference for them. And so, how can you then send incentives for people to continue doing this, or even extend their efforts? And peer-to-peer electronic cash for me, or being able to reward them with some form of coupon, token, I don't know, free meal, whatever it is something that would allow these people, because they're unbankable, right? They will not receive the 25 cent like in Germany for the plastic bottle in their bank account. They will look for a mean to receive something in return. Typically, it's cash right now, but again, it's hardly as scalable. And then you don't do it for people that are remote somewhere or so. And so what we are doing here is we have partnered up with a young company, very mission-driven, Spanish-based, and we have put down some money, $1,000 or so, and people can collectively help collect bottles and then deposit it as a machine. You put it in a machine, and they get a QR code printed, which is representing, we call it EUGX right now, right? It's not official, obviously, but we exchange it later on into real UGX. But the whole idea is how can you incentivize people that are not part of the economic system to contribute. And it's so funny because, again, Coca-Cola is a company that is actually dependent on these people doing this job in these countries. So I think you made a very good point. They should also consider how they can almost like formalize this part of the value chain. They need it, but they don't recognize it as their value chain right now officially, right? And so there's very mechanisms. So again, this is micropayments that we pay. That's very attractive for us, and it's programmable money, so we can make it all kinds of short forms and shapes. I just want to go to one other point. Is really the data ledger aspect. I mean, how much reporting we have from institutions, organizations about their sustainability efforts, right? The ESG targets. But there's a lot of greenwashing. And we had a case last year. I worked together with an organization that does sustainable clothing. And they showed me that the collective reporting of sustainable cotton in Europe was like 300% of what is actually available in the market. So there's a lot of greenwashing. And holding people, institutions responsible for the data they provide is something where I also see a strong angle for blockchain.
I think there'll be a big change in the way that we view consuming. If the DPP works and blockchain is kind of taken on as a technology, at the moment when we consume, we don't think about stuff in terms of its secondhand value. If we've got a mechanism to understand what is in a product and what the future value of the composition of that product might be. So if you own a car, for example, and let's say you pay £10,000 for a car, you may hold that for 10 years and expect that it would go to, 0 or 500 quid or whatever. But if you buy a more expensive car that is on the blockchain, where all the data of that car has impermanence, has provenance, is indelible and so on, and actually in 5 years' time, the amortization, if you like, or the depreciation of that car is 5% because it's made up of more valuable products, then you'd be more likely to keep that car because it's got resale value. And so the DPP is a massive piece of legislation that will help with trying to change the way that we consume things so that you won't just drink a bottle of water and not think about the bottle. You'll drink the water and think about, well, who's going to get the value from the plastic afterwards? And you need a global distributed ledger in order to be able to do that at scale.
That seems like a good message for Emmanuelle and her team as they go through their answers to the consultation responses, right? So I'm sure that they will definitely consider using blockchain technology for this specific great initiative of the digital product passport. But maybe now, for the last couple of minutes that we have left in this debate, I wanted to get back to the real question, to the main question that we had when thinking about this debate: the utility, the environmental impact of blockchains. And I want to maybe be a bit provocative here, but as you may know, we've been discussing this yesterday, especially in our panels around the MiCA regulation and the finalization of this regulatory framework, which also goes through the so-called level 2 and level 3 the measures development by ESMA and EBA, the European Security Market Authority, and the European Banking Authority, of which we had representatives here. So the point here, ESMA will be called in October to try and assess the sustainability, the environmental impact of different consensus mechanism as part of the MiCA framework. Maybe a quick round, what is your, let's say, message to these policymakers and regulators, which of course, the industry will be also asked to provide feedback and input. So we also call on all of you to participate in that process and help us help them. But maybe a quick message from each of you. What do you think that these regulators need to keep in mind when assessing this utility and environmental impact?
I'm happy to go first. I think the first message is it needs to be taken in context. So data centers consume more electricity in the world than all of cryptocurrency. I'm not saying that cryptocurrency should consume as much electricity as it does, but it just does need to be taken in context. If we're going to draw back on proof of works consensus mechanisms, we also need to think about, is everyone allowed to make a video of everything all the time? The other thing I'd say is that there's enough natural gas flared in the world every year to power 30 million homes. So I think the position of Bitcoin mining in particular is to use up excess energy that is not currently being used. And that may be when power uptake off the grid is low. It may be taking a Bitcoin miner out to an oil rig and taking the flared gas and turning that into digital currency. The beauty of Bitcoin, as I'm sure you're all aware, is that it transcends physical energy expenditure to digital value. And if we can use that to harness some of the waste energy that we're not using in the world at the moment, I think that's a really good thing.
Thank you. Patrick, Emmanuelle?
Yeah, maybe I take over. I have a strong view on proof of work versus proof of stake in terms of data security and data integrity. And when it comes to proof of work, one has to understand that about 95% or so of the ecological footprint is for solving the algorithmic puzzle, finding a block. Only the rest is on writing data on chain, which means that if you allow the block size to significantly scale and process more transactions in a block, the ecological footprint per transaction, so per utility, so to say, will fall dramatically. So we strongly recommend that ESMA is going to define clearly how this ecological footprint is measured. And we suggest it's a per transaction breakdown. And that's one point. And writing data on chain costs money. So even if everyone, produces a gazillion cat videos, right? They're not necessarily incentivized to put it on chain because it costs money. So people will put stuff on chain that has a business case for them, or is a regulatory requirement to be immutably saved, or it has some form of value to you. But you don't do it just because instead of, using a free cloud server that is offered to you. So I think the economics will solve this issue. And just lastly, the hash rate, the significant hash rate that we see on BTC right now is purely a reflection of the expectation that price will just surge because, out of a miracle, because of the halvening that comes up. But it's not needed. Significantly less of this hash rate would also secure the blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain is secure because it's public. It's not because there's so much hash rate. That's my message.
All right, thank you. Emmanuelle, any final comment you would like to share?
Maybe not a comment to the regulator, but a comment to the industry.
Please.
Because
We like
coming to you, I've been, thinking through all the Green Deal proposals, and there are many. And I thought that there could be many opportunities for, companies. We have basically designed the architecture of where Europe wants to go, but there will be a lot of implementation work together, and therefore also a lot of opportunities for companies. So I don't know if I could ask, your association for the next time that we could have a debate on, other pieces of the Green Deal that can enable other types of business opportunities, from energy to combating deforestation to recording properly, reporting information that companies have to give as part of the non-financial reporting, due diligence, you name it. So a lot of work for you, Tommaso, and the members. So it would be really my pleasure to also.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. I think that's a great way to conclude this panel debate with a call, not only to regulators, but to the industry as well. The policymakers are calling on you. There are opportunities, there are things that can be developed in this space. And especially once the regulatory framework is there, we should all be ready to capitalize on it and get these opportunities. Thank you all to my panelists. A big round of applause, please, to this great debate.